that opening night in Charlotte was really special. They made it like a black tie and 22,000 people. It was huge, sold out. And we're playing the Cleveland Cavaliers, who were really good with Brad Daugherty and Ron Harper and Mark Price and Larry Nance. We got our doors blown off and unfortunately lost by 40. So it didn't go the way we planned.
No.
And I'll never forget the buzzer sounds and all of a sudden a standing ovation. The crowd's going crazy. My first thought was they're cheering for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And guess what? They weren't cheering for Cleveland. They were cheering us.
Then you are in Australia right now.
You're talking NBA basketball. You're talking great teams. You're talking great individual players.
Takes it off, and there's number 23, and of course Johnny goes nuts.
So I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it now.
I just tried to go out there and play my game.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Adam. I don't like anybody. I'm not a people person.
Strand, you make the pass. Yes. Christian, can you catch the ball? Yes.
All the stars were aligned and all the muscles fired at the right time, and I was able to get off the ground and throw one down.
I was saving that as a surprise for you.
And now, introducing your host for In All Airness, Adam Ryan.
Welcome to episode 74. Thanks for joining me. This is part 2 of my extended conversation with Kelly Tripucka. Again, a big thanks to Chris, that's Kelly's brother, who helped us connect. I really appreciate it. I mentioned this in part 1. Our conversation was recorded over 2 days, almost 3 weeks apart. So for context, I've added brief radio static sounds that will let you know the chat is switching from the first to the second recording. That allowed me to edit the chat into chronological order. We've discussed Kelly's early life, his memories of high school and college, plus his first 2 NBA seasons, including an all-star nod as a rookie, almost unheard of. The second part of our conversation picks up where it left off, the end of the 1983 NBA season. We cover Kelly's next 3 years in Detroit, including a second all-star appearance alongside 2 fellow Pistons, and the incredible 1984 first-round playoff series versus Bernard King's New York Knicks. Kelly's world was turned upside down in August of 1986 in a shock trade to Utah, where he'd play 2 seasons. The details behind how he learnt of that move need to be heard to be believed. Kelly moved to the much greener pastures of Charlotte and was the first player to sign with the new franchise in June of 1988. We reminisce on those original Hornets years, his post-playing career, years of broadcasting, and plenty more. Stay up to date with my podcast and subscribe to my monthly email newsletter. You'll receive exclusive details on upcoming podcast episodes, future high-profile guests to appear on the show, and much more. Simply visit inallairness.com/news. Show notes for this episode, including links to numerous topics covered, are at inallairness.com/74. Now, on to the show. Now, that 1983 season was your best scoring year. You were third in the league at 26.5 points a game, and you're only behind Alex English and Kiki VanDeWeghe of Denver.
Yeah.
At the end of that season, Scotty Robertson was replaced as coach by the great Chuck Daly, and then for each of the next 3 seasons, you'd make the NBA playoffs. Just before we get to an incredible playoff series in 1984 that you were part of, you were also in another great high-scoring game, the 3 overtime classic against Denver in December of 83. You won the game in the end. I think it was 186 to 184, and Isaiah and John Long went for 40+. You had 35, and then for Denver, Kiki VanDeWeghe had 51, and Alex English had 47. So incredible stat lines all around. Again, there's some great highlights of this game on YouTube. I think it's through the Pistons official YouTube channel. Do you mind just briefly touching on that game and just the incredible circumstances of the 3 overtime finish?
That game's talked about more than a lot of games. Anniversary comes up on that game. I've done it a couple of times. People want to know about it, call about it, say it's another anniversary, and all of a sudden you forget, like going, gosh, has it been that long? And so they want to talk about it. I personally think it's a game that no one will ever break. I don't think that record is going to be broken, the scoring record. I really don't. I don't see it. That's a lot of points. People like to say, boy, nobody played any defense. You know, it wasn't that way. It was just guys like hitting shots. I mean, you look at guys like Alex English and Kiki VanDeWeghe and Dan Issel and people like, we were hitting shots. We had guys that can score at every position. You had Bill Laimbeer and Isaiah Thomas and John Long and myself and Vinnie Johnson. We had people that could score, at every position. And it was just one of those nights where, that's the way Denver plays, number one. So you get stuck in that regard because they don't really run any plays. They just try to get up and down the court. It's kind of freelance and move the ball and get shots up. And, back and forth we went. Little did we know what we were headed for. I'm sure if you asked the people how many were in the stands, whether it was like 10,000, there's probably about 30 or 40,000 people that said they were there. It's just grown over the years, and I'm sure the scorers ran out of paper and trying to figure out where the hell they're going to put all these names and numbers and things. And the game just went in. I got in foul trouble. That was, you laugh about whatever I had, 35 or something like that. I didn't play most of the second half because I got in foul trouble. There was maybe like 1 or 2 3-pointers made in that game. There you go. Another ridiculous stat in a 186, 184 or whatever it was game. But that's because the 3-pointer was not prevalent. It was only a shot to catch up or at the end of a quarter or whatever. So we went back and forth, and you kind of got a sense of it the way the scoring went, because it was still high scoring in the third quarter and then at the end of regulation, and you're going, man, it's a lot of points. But, we're at the end of a road trip, and you really want to end the road trip on a positive. So before we went home, we really wanted to win this game. You hate to get in a game like this and then go home and lose. At that time also, at least I was thinking, where are we going to eat after this game? If this game keeps going on, not many places are open up this late, and then you can't eat. And so, some of the funniest things you think of, but, at that time, it's not like, they have food in the locker room or these guys get on charter planes and they feed them. We flew commercial. We were getting on a plane the next morning. They might not have room service, so you're like going, man, I got to eat. You might not get any food. And then next thing you know, the game goes in overtime. It's like, what is it? It's like 130 something or 140 something, like going, boy, nobody's missing here. We can't stop anybody, but we're hanging in. And then I do remember we made a couple of strange plays at the end of the first overtime where Bill Laimbeer got fouled and we were down 2 and he missed the free throw. Bill was a pretty good free throw shooter.
Yes.
He must have tightened up a little bit. He missed the first one. So then we actually ran a play, which never works. You missed the second one on purpose, which he did. And Isaiah comes flying down the lane and actually gets the rebound and puts it back in to tie the game, to send it to another overtime. I mean, that doesn't happen. The ball came off the rim perfectly. He was there. He caught it, put it back in, and we go on. Otherwise, the game's over. We lose. There's never any record or anything like that. So, I mean, obviously something special is happening when things are starting to work in your favor. Then the second overtime, because I didn't play much, I told you in the second half, I scored every point we had in the second overtime, which was like 13. I scored all our team's points. I mean, it was like crazy. That doesn't happen, but I got it going. I was obviously maybe a little more fresher than other guys, and then we get to another overtime, and then we finally end up winning. I mean, even that wasn't a sure thing because we're up 4, and then they hit it a long 2, and then we had to inbound the ball. And I remember I got the ball in the inbounds or whatever and just dribbled away, and we ended up winning that game. So it was certainly easier to take for us than it was for them because you're exhausted. It was like playing 2 games. I know that was a lot of comments about maybe we should get day off because we just played a doubleheader, but that wasn't working. But it made the flight back home easier the next morning. We were tired. It ended our road trip on a positive, and I'm not sure we ever found anything to eat either, so that kind of made me mad. But it was a fun game to be a part of. It's probably more talked about and more asked about than any other game, I think, that I played in. I think it has some significance and it's special, but I also don't believe that that scoring record will ever be broken. I just don't see anybody scoring 186, 184, even with 3-pointers. I don't see them scoring at that kind of clip, but I may be wrong, but it's still going on now. How long's it been now? Almost 30 years.
Yeah. Oh, well, over 30 now.
Yeah, over. That's right. 83, right? Wasn't it?
Yeah, 83. It's incredible, but you never see both teams score that high. Even if someone has 140 or 150, the other team might have 120 or something.
There you go. I agree. Yeah.
Incredible circumstances. I'm glad you finally got to have some food at some stage though after the game.
It probably wasn't very good. I tell you what, the peanut butter and jelly sandwich might have been all we got.
Not ideal. You were named an All-Star for the second time in 1984 in a game that was played at Denver. Your East team won another high-scoring game in overtime, and Isaiah Thomas was the game's MVP. So how was that second All-Star experience, given as well that Bill Laimbeer was on the squad as well? So you had three Pistons at the forefront there on the Eastern squad.
Well, I mean, making an All-Star team in anything was tremendous. I mean, going back to my rookie year and playing in New Jersey and standing in the team picture next to Dr. J and Larry Bird and, all these other guys that I competed against, and seeing All-Star on your shirt. I mean, that was a dream come true, and know that you belong. And, the thing about the All-Star games then versus, say, now, it's completely different. I mean, it was a big thing then. It's not the spectacle, obviously, that All-Star Weekend is now, but we played a real game. And that's one thing that kind of irks me a little bit with what they do now. I mean, they're not playing. They're getting out of each other's way.
They are.
You dunk, I dunk. You take a three, I take a three. I can't watch that. I guess the motivation for us is, the winner got like $2,000. It's a heck of a lot more, whatever they're getting now, and the loser got $1,000, or it's $3,000 and $1,000, whatever it was. That meant a lot to us at that time.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I was fortunate to be on two winning teams, but if you watch those games, whether 1982 or 1984, those games were played. We didn't let people score or get out of their way or it wasn't like that. You had to earn your points or whatever. So I was happy to be a part of that era in regards to, I don't want to make a mockery of the game. I mean, some people call it an exhibition. Depending on what your definition of exhibition is, I don't even watch it now. That's not even watchable TV to me.
Yeah.
You come on the floor and this guy goes in, like I said before, for a dunk, and then he gets out of the way, and then you dunk, and then there's 60 3-pointers taken, and they're screwing around with the dribbling and the passing and turnovers, and I don't think that shows anybody anything. We played real basketball back then, and that was the motivation. You wanted to be on the winning team, you wanted to get the bigger check, and that's the way it was. So for me to be a part of that a second time as an All-Star, I probably thought I should have made it the year before.
For sure.
I had some injuries. People might have said I didn't play enough games, but I've seen guys make All-Star games with less games, but, was averaging third in the league in scoring at the time or whatever. Hey, sometimes it's a popularity contest and whatever. So to be a member of the Pistons and have three guys play for them, that was a big thing for us, with Isaiah and Bill and I going. And we went out to Denver. That was a lot of fun. They put on a good show. I think they had one of the dunk contests at that time that was kind of fairly new, rather than what goes on now, even though the last one might have been pretty good, but that's been getting a little stale as well. We didn't have all the other hoopla to go along with it. What I remember about that All-Star game, obviously Isaiah winning the MVP, he was great. It was good for our team and Detroit, and having three guys from one team was big, because other than like the Celtics, they were always going to have, three guys when you got Parrish, McHale, and Bird, and they were one of the, known teams, whereas the Pistons were still kind of an up-and-coming team, and here we had three guys represent the team, so that was pretty big. And that All-Star game in Denver was also where I got to meet one of my heroes. One of my idols was Pistol Pete Maravich.
Oh, wow, okay, fantastic.
And I'd never met Pistol Pete. I wore number 7 because I was a big Mickey Mantle fan, for the New York Yankees. And when I was a kid, I used to have his cards and put them in my bicycle and used to flip for him or whatever. And I got to know Mickey Mantle later on in his life before he died, and played in his golf outing, and, got to know him a little bit. And that was a big thrill for me, because I was a huge Mickey Mantle fan, probably the reason why I wore number 7. But also I was a big fan of Jerry West. I was a big fan of Wilt Chamberlain, and I was a big fan of Pistol Pete. And I think he was way, way, way ahead of his time, because I think of the abuse, and I read a lot of stuff on Pistol Pete, and the life he went through, cut way too short. But he was kind of like a lost soul, but when you think about what he did in college, those records that he has are just like off the charts. When he's averaging 40-something points, no three-pointer, not playing as many games. When the defense were designed to stop you, a lot of people called him a hot dog, even into the pros. He never got the recognition because they thought he was a hot dog. Yet you see some of the stuff that goes on now, say like you're a showman and you're a star. You realize that Pistol Pete played in this era with Twitter and ESPN and the internet? It would be unbelievable. Unbelievable.
It'd be fantastic to see.
Yeah, I think that's why he was so ahead of his time. I loved him. I mean, I wore 44 in college, and he wore that, and he wore 7 as well for a while with Utah, and so that was part of the 7 deal with me. But I remember we were in Denver, and I was coming out to warm up, I think it was, and all of a sudden he was standing in the corner of the court. I said, "Oh, I got to go say, oh, that's Pistol Pete." I went over and introduced myself, and he knew who I was. That was damn cool. That was just awesome. I mean, Pistol Pete knows who I am.
Oh, well.
And I just had to ask him. I said, Pete, where are those socks? The floppy socks. He goes, "Oh, Kelly," he goes, "those could probably stand up in the corner by themselves somewhere. They're long gone." So, I used to, I read all Pistol Pete, the books on Pistol Pete and the movies that they put out and whatever, and tough upbringing with his father and things like that. I just thought, man, this guy was so good and so talented. When you think of what he did, and those records in college are they're ridiculous, the records he's got. No one will ever come close to that because no one ever plays 4 years to begin with. I was a huge Pistol Pete fan. So for me to go to that second All-Star game, and enough said there, but then I got to meet Pistol Pete. That was a big day for me. And then a few years down the line, I remember where I was playing, so he died right around 88 or 89. So it wasn't too much further. I think we were just gotten to Philly in the airport. We heard that he passed away in a pickup game. And that was very, very sad. So great guy, great basketball player. Troubled human being, but man, he just played in the wrong era. He'd be a superstar in this era with what goes on. So he was awesome.
Thanks so much for sharing that meeting you had with him as well. I think he passed away early in 1988.
There you go. And he was right around there.
Yeah, a great friend of mine, Todd Spear, he'll be very happy to hear that you're a big fan of Pete Maravich, because he absolutely loves Pete Maravich and researches him to this day, trying to find uncovered gems about his career. So,
oh boy, there's so much out there. Like I said, a couple of books that were written on him. They made that movie when he was a kid and growing up. That was I watched that and God, I read everything about him. He was just a guy that was just always looking for like the meaning of life. I guess I don't know else how to put it. He's sitting on the roof. He'd be into UFOs. He found God, and he just always seemed like he was always searching. He just had a troubled life. With his father, was very strict with him, and the basketball was just an extension of him. And then, he went through some injuries, and then the stigma of being a hot dog, and in the pros and things like that. It's just amazing. If he had been in another era, you'd be talking about him every single day. So no, I'm a huge Pistol Pete fan. Loved everything about him. I think he was a great player.
That's great to hear. Just returning to the 1984 NBA playoffs, I alluded to it a little while ago. You were in a famous 5-game series against the New York Knicks, and ended up losing in an overtime thriller in Game 5 at Joe Louis Arena. You scored 23 points in that game, but also in, I think, the third game of the series, you had 40 points, which is an incredible effort, which is overlooked sometimes when people chat about this series. Bernard King obviously stole the show, I guess. He had 4 games of 40-plus out of the 5. When you think of that series, what sort of comes to mind most about that battle against the Knicks?
It shouldn't be having 5-game series. Actually, they should actually go back to 5-game series.
I think so as well.
I say that jokingly because at that time, that was something new. That series should have been 7 games. But I think they should go back to the 5 games in the first round, because some of the teams shouldn't be in the playoffs.
Yeah.
You're playing 7 games, whether it's San Antonio or Golden State, and they're winning 4-0, and you're going like, why bother? That's my opinion on that. Because again, you remember they used to do 3-game series, some of them.
Yeah, that's right.
that really could cause headaches because then sometimes the best team doesn't always win, particularly if, you have a bad game, you get upset and all of a sudden the other team goes home and whatever, you know what I mean? They win a game and you get somebody that wasn't supposed to lose. In 7-game series, the best team usually wins.
Yep.
5 games, probably for the most part, the best team wins, but it changes a little bit, but I certainly can see it just in the first round because I think that's when you get a little bit more disparity between the two teams. When you can get some of these 1-8 matchups and they're really, really lopsided. I don't see the reason for playing 7 games, but this particular series with the Knicks, that'll go down one of the best in the ages. We lost that series in the first game. We got upset at home. It was a close game. We did some things. We didn't play well, and you got to win that first game. So we kind of put ourselves behind the 8 ball. Bernard was great. Coach put bigger guys on him. We had Earl Curidan and Kent Benson. He tried to put bigger people in, but he just kept scoring. He basically carried them. So we were behind the 8 ball after losing and upset, and we win the second game, and we're 1-1 going to New York. We had a real good chance in game 3, and like I said, I had 40 or something.
Yeah, 40.
At that time, I think I was part of a trivia question a couple of years ago. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't even know it. This was a couple of years ago, watching a game. I think it was maybe LeBron's first game. Highest scoring game by a guy playing in his first road game, okay, in the playoffs.
Yeah, I read that actually, researching for the chat.
Yeah, something like that. Like LeBron scored 40, and they said he ties Kelly Tripucka.
Wow.
That was my first, obviously, road playoff game.
Yeah, incredible, hey.
I didn't even know this, and this is 20-something years later.
That's incredible.
They actually mentioned that on TV. Didn't know anything about it, but, you score 40, you lose, it's not as good. Our backs were against the wall. Now you had to win game 4 in the Garden. And we did. And that was huge because now we had a lot of confidence, and you're heading back home. At that time, the Silverdome, where we played, the roof had caved in from a snowstorm, so we had played a couple of games at Joe Louis Arena, and that kind of screwed everything up because now you had to travel all the way from the suburbs, 30, 40 minutes north of downtown and come down and play where the Red Wings play. So we had to play down at Joe Louis, and it was packed. It was about 120 degrees in that place. It was so hot. It was an unbelievable game. Again, Bernard King went crazy, and then we kind of hung around, and then we made a nice comeback. And a lot of that had to do with Isaiah scoring like 16 points in 30 seconds or whatever it is. We thought we were going to win that game. We ended up falling short. That was very, very disappointing because we thought we were the better team. But we had to kind of go through our learning process, as far as the playoffs concerned, because this was all new for the Pistons. And then the following year, we ended up winning and then getting to the second round and playing the Celtics, and we were tied with them. But the Knicks series was very, very frustrating because obviously the way Isaiah played in Game 5 and not being able to kind of beat Bernard King because he kind of single-handedly got them to the 3-2 win. But I just thought we were the better team. But, sometimes the better team doesn't win. You fought through adversity and lose Game 1 and have to win Game 2. Then you lose Game 3 and have to win Game 4. And we do all those things. Then we get Game 5 in a hot box at Joe Louis. And crowd was great. And it was an exciting game. But give them credit. They figured out a way to win, and we went home for the summer to try to contemplate how we get better, which we did. But, that's sometimes how it goes in the playoffs. You got to kind of find your way and learn by fire. It certainly helped us in the long run and obviously helped the Pistons later on down the road because they ended up winning a couple all the way.
Yeah, indeed. There's a great little segment on the NBA Entertainment release, Awesome Endings, which focuses on that Game 5 in the 84 playoffs. And then I think it's called the NBA Dynasty Series, which has that entire Game 5. Might have been the Knicks TV broadcast with Marv Albert and Butch Beard, perhaps, were commentating. I can't remember.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, and I watched that maybe a couple of months ago, the full game, just from start to finish, and it was just fantastic. But unfortunately, not quite the end result that you obviously would have been hoping for.
That is probably shown as much as any around here with NBA TV and things like that. Somebody's always saying somebody watch that. Again, the years go by, we get older, and 1983 or 84 or whatever it is, it gets further and further away. But it was still great basketball, and just the atmosphere. People just see the atmosphere, how much the game has changed, and what it was like back then. And Game 5, and you had a couple of great performances by Bernard King and Isaiah Thomas doing what he's doing at the end of the game. It was like he was taking on people 1-on-5. We were just trying to get out of his way. He made plays, like I told you before. He had the ability to do that. That was not his job. It's a nice thing to have in your back pocket when you can be able to score when he wants to, and he could score. You know what I mean? But he was much more than that. He could handle the ball, and he had a mean streak, and he wanted to win. And I always wanted to play with guys that wanted to win as much as I wanted to win. So he was definitely one of those guys. So he and I, we came into the league together, and we became very friendly. We kind of grew up together in a lot of ways, and our careers mirrored each other. He was fortunate to stay there and play his whole career in Detroit, and I missed out on a couple of championships. I kind of still regret that, but again, out of my control, I got traded, and I knew we were very close to being a championship team, because when you look at guys, you get lucky and do your homework and draft guys like Joe Dumars, and you make trades for like a Bill Laimbeer or Vinnie Johnson. You get Rick Mahorn. You have guys like John Long, and then the key probably to them, I've always told people, was the summer that they traded me in '86. They drafted Dennis Rodman and John Salley in June. And you don't know what you have. And I got traded in August, I think.
That was my next question. Yeah, August '86.
But it was right after the draft. So, I would end up playing with those guys. I didn't understand why they traded, but I thought those two guys, more than anybody else, were the key to that team, because we had everything. I hate to sound selfish or full of myself or whatever, but I think if I didn't get traded, I think we would have won either way, because I thought those two guys end up making the team complete. Unbeknownst at that time, you don't know what you have. But Salley and Rodman gave them size and length and guys that defended, and along with what you already had. So if you had a Joe Dumars and Isaiah Thomas and a Vinnie Johnson, they're already there. You had a Bill Laimbeer and a Rick Mahorn, and maybe like myself or whatever, and then you had guys coming off the bench, in a Rodman and a Salley, that were long and athletic, could run, could defend. That's kind of what they needed, and so those guys were really important. But unfortunately, I was traded for Adrian Dantley, and then he was traded for Mark Aguirre, and I think that particular position was interchangeable. I don't think it mattered. I think that the two key guys for that team, obviously Joe Dumars is a Hall of Famer. Isaiah Thomas is a Hall of Famer. Bill Laimbeer was great. But I just think Rodman and Salley, what they became, really was the key to sending that team over the top, to being the great team that they ended up becoming.
Yeah, definitely. And then Rodman was named Defensive Player of the Year back-to-back.
He was a lot to handle. That's a strange character, but his athleticism to be able to run and block shots and defend, and that's just something different. They took a chance and didn't know what they were getting, and or maybe they did know what they were getting. But I think those two guys end up being the key. Hey, that's exactly how you build a team. I think those two guys in particular really end up making the Pistons the champions that they end up becoming because of those two guys.
I really appreciate the honesty. As we alluded to, in August of 1986, the Pistons sent you and Ken Benson to the Utah Jazz in exchange for Adrian Dantley and a couple of future second-round draft picks. I read an article last night, actually, while I was doing research, where Jack McCloskey, the then GM of Detroit, said Kelly was instrumental in helping us go from a very poor basketball team to a very good team. So you sort of have alluded to it a little bit, but what was your take on that move to Utah and the transition in your career that you had to make for those following two seasons?
To describe in a word, devastated. It was the worst day of my life. One of the worst. I don't want to pick one or the other or whatever. Obviously, my dad dying would be worse than that, but I'll put it this way. The worst day of my professional life. It was unexpected how it came about, the whole thing in a nutshell. I was actually at a golf outing, Yogi Berra's golf outing. And I had just gotten married the year before in 1985. And so I played the 85-86 season. So, and in that summer, I played in Yogi Berra is a very good family friend of ours and just passed away last year or whatever. But he has a golf outing here locally every year for the last 30 years or so. And this is when he first started out running it. We had just finished playing. I was in the locker room showering and changing after the round. The lockers are in aisles like you would at a country club.
Right.
Getting changed or getting ready to shower or whatever it may be in one aisle. And I heard some guys talking in the next aisle over the top of the lockers. And one of them, I swear, said, "Did you hear about the trade today?" Now, they have no idea I'm over there.
All right.
And the one guy said, "Yeah, Tripucka got traded." And I stopped and I'm like going, did he just say that? So I decided to walk down the aisle to the next aisle. And as I got around the corner and stopped right there, these two guys or one guy, whoever it was, they see me and they know who I am. So they it could have stopped the clock.
Yeah.
And I said, "What did you just say?" And they were like stutter and go, I didn't say anything. I just heard something. I said, "What'd you say?" They said, "You got traded." And I'm like going, I got traded and I don't know about it? So I'm really upset. I call home. I'm like, 10, 15 minutes away. My brother answered the phone. I said, "Did somebody call?" He goes, "Where are you?" I said, "I didn't ask you that." I said, "Somebody call." He says, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm at Yogi's outing." He's, "I can come there." I said, "What happened?" And he said that the Pistons called and said you were traded to Utah. Oh boy. So I was not happy. And apparently the conversation kind of went, this is how it was handled. Jack McCloskey called my house and I wasn't there. They asked for me and he said, "I'm not there." My brother was thinking, well, the general manager doesn't call very often, like never. And he says, "You want to speak to Kelly?" He says, "Well, he's not here." He said, "But, I can find him. I can have him call you back. Why don't you give me 5 minutes to find him?" And he said, "No, never mind. But when you see him or if you see him, just tell him he's been traded."
Oh.
Yeah.
Whoa. So he didn't actually then speak to you and tell you about the trade, or you just had to hear that from your brother?
No.
Oh. Wow.
I wasn't going to go, to tell you the truth, Adam. That's how I felt. I was devastated. I was, it was very emotional for me. And, I didn't know where this was coming from, why, anything like that. I mean, why would you trade me? To Utah wasn't exactly where I wanted to go. Not that I wanted to go anywhere, but in my opinion, I've said this for years. I don't know exactly. I think Detroit was still had a little animosity towards me when I became a free agent. And it's kind of ironic now when you look at the money that they're giving away in the NBA. I was a free agent after my third year, so I'd been an all-star twice.
Yep.
And was third in the league in scoring. I always wondered what I would be getting now.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
It'd be a whole lot of money.
Indeed.
They wanted to double my salary at the time, which wasn't very much. Trust me. Compared to today's, it was pennies. I was a two-time all-star and third in the league in scoring. All you want to do is double my salary, which was nothing. So I didn't accept that, and I became a free agent and, solicited some offers. So I actually signed an offer sheet with Cleveland.
Okay.
In summer of '84, I signed an offer sheet with Cleveland because they were going to give me, some money. And it was going to be more than doubling my salary, which was only about, maybe $250,000 at the time. So they were going to give me like $450. I don't know, something like that. But I thought I was worth a lot more than that. So that's why I signed with Cleveland. I didn't want to go to Cleveland, but I would have gone because it was, that's business at that time.
Yep.
As it turned out, Detroit ended up matching the offer at the last minute, and I got my contract. I think somewhere along the line that might have come into play, which seems kind of silly, and I may be totally off base, but I thought that had something to do with it. I'm not saying that had everything to do with it, just something. So The fact that Adrian Dantley, who I was traded for, was having problems with Frank Layden. So I think the opportunity was there that they just wanted to. Now, you think at that time you're trading Adrian Dantley, who's an all-star player, that you want to get something in return. Well, they got Kent Benson and they got myself, so I was an all-star player. I was younger than AD. So you figure, okay, they really want me. Didn't understand exactly what Detroit would want in Dantley because he wasn't exactly, their type of player. I mean, AD's a great player. I know him and he's a Hall of Famer, obviously, but, that's not exactly the type of guy that they needed, particularly when, he was more of a ball guy, and they're more of a, team oriented. And of course they're more athletic and stuff like that. So, he could certainly score with the best of them, but just a different type of player. So it wasn't for me to figure out or whatever, but I was upset about it and didn't want to go to Utah. So I ended up going to Utah because that's what you do or whatever. But that was the worst 2 years of my life playing wise. So I just thought I got stuck in the middle of a feud, I guess you could call it, between Frank Layden, the coach, and Adrian Dantley, that whatever their problems were, he just wanted to get rid of them and was happy to get something in return. Unfortunately for me, I was the guy that got caught in the middle because when I went out there, they never used me. I was an all-star. I scored 20-something points a game, and next thing you know, they had John Stockton and Karl Malone, who were very young at the time. It was their second and third year. In fact, John wasn't even starting yet. He was playing behind Ricky Green. And Karl was, extremely talented and was going to be a great player. And they both ended up being Hall of Famers. But I just felt like I got out there, and next thing you know, I'm setting screens and standing out in the corner. That's just not my game. So, that's where the whole thing kind of fell apart, and I didn't feel like they were using me, and I wasn't playing much. And next thing you know, my time dwindled. I knew this wasn't the place for me. It wasn't working out. They had other talented people, and if they weren't going to use me, then trade me. In fact, they asked. Frank Layden said that if you don't want to be here, let us know in a meeting.
Oh, wow.
I actually raised my hand. Then all of a sudden I got in trouble for saying that. Like, how do you ask somebody that and then you get mad at them for saying it?
Yeah, I was going to ask, how, if you don't mind my asking, how was your relationship with Frank for those couple of seasons? Because I know that he had a few issues, obviously, with Adrian, but did you get along okay, or was there a few issues there too? Or
we just kind of existed.
Yeah, okay.
I didn't have a lot of respect for him because I just thought, he was a joke teller. Jerry Sloan was the assistant coach at the time. And I really, really respected him because he was a great player. He ended up becoming a real good coach, when they really had their success. But Frank was kind of like, he was a comedian. He coached the game, but he didn't really coach the game. He talked to people in the stands, and he didn't really do anything in practice. Jerry Sloan ran the practices, and I didn't appreciate that. You know what I mean? And on top of that, I wasn't playing. You weren't using me. I'm setting back screens. I'm getting killed every time I set a screen for Karl Malone or whatever, and I'm standing in the corner. Every once in a while I take a three-pointer. That's not my game. So
yeah.
I just didn't fit in with what they were trying to do. And I understand because John Stockton is tremendous, a lot like Isaiah Thomas. Great player, competitor, could play. He finally worked his way into becoming, their point guard versus Ricky Green. And, Ricky Green was pretty good as well. You could tell that those two guys were going to be something special, particularly Karl, because you knew the body and the size and whatever. And, he could dominate down low. He was tough to handle. But I just wanted to be in the system where, was used to get back to being, 20-point scorer and doing my thing and running. I'd have flashes of it every once in a while, but it's like, I shared time, and then, games I wouldn't do much. And then I thought I'd only last a year there, and they'd trade me in the summer.
Right.
I really did. I didn't think, I lasted 1 year and they'll get rid of me. This isn't working out. And they bring me back. I think right before training camp, we heard a rumor there was going to be a trade. And actually, they trade Ken Benson to Cleveland, and he loved it there. He was an outdoorsman. He liked being in Utah. I'm like going, what are you trading a guy that likes to be here, and yet I'm there and don't want to be there, and you keep me?
Oh, man. Yeah.
So it made no sense. So they actually brought Darryl Dawkins, God rest his soul, to Utah. I'm like, oh, God. So as it turned out, long story short, Darryl Dawkins and he didn't get along with Frank either. And we hardly played the second season. I was sitting on the bench, and this is how far I fell. There's games that I'm not even getting in. And then they're thinking about like putting you in at the end of games, and that's like embarrassing. I'm not going in. At least he would ask if you want to go in. I'm not going in with a minute to go. I mean, I'm an all-star. This is silly.
Yeah. So
he didn't like us because fans would start chanting our names, and Darryl Dawkins is a character, so he was actually funnier than Frank, which is, in my opinion, not real hard to do, but Darryl was very funny. And so we used to have bets on like who's gonna get in first. It didn't work out, so that really killed my career in a lot of ways, and it's still hard to deal with, but there's nothing you can do. Sometimes you're at the mercy of a coach. That's what I always say. Sometimes you're lucky. Guys say, well, you get with a certain team, hey, you get lucky when you get with a certain team. If you're with the Golden State Warriors, or, you're with the Celtics back in the day or whatever, you could be with, some of these crappy teams. You just don't know. You're with, Chuck Daly and Scotty Robertson, and next thing you know, you're with Frank Layden. Just your career's in the hands of somebody else. That's my point. And sometimes people don't realize that. It's just, where you are at the time and who you're coached by and whatever. So you got to be lucky as well as good. So it was a tough 2 years. In fact, there was even some infighting with the owner at the time, Larry Miller. I remember one game we were getting ready to play the Lakers in Magic on national TV. We're in the locker room and waiting to hear a pregame speech and go over the assignments and whatever you usually do before a game, before we go out to warm up. And I swear there's only like 20 minutes left, and we're still sitting in the locker room because Frank and Larry Miller are in the coach's room yelling at each other.
Oh, jeez.
We could hear them.
Wow.
So we're like going, what is going on here? We got to get out and warm up or whatever. So they finally come out, and all of a sudden Frank goes, okay, we're going to make some changes here or whatever. And he looks at me, he goes, you're going to start and you got Magic. I go, I don't ever play. Oh, okay, now I'm going to start. And oh, by the way, you got Magic.
Oh.
So apparently Larry Miller didn't like what Frank was doing with me, and maybe he thought, well, we're paying this guy and you're not playing him or whatever. Who knows? I thought maybe they'd try to embarrass me. Who knows? I don't know. But I don't know if we won that game. I don't remember. We might have won it. But either way, I had a pretty good game. I had like 6 or 7 threes.
Wow. That
didn't last very long for whatever reason. So it was the second year in Utah. It was even worse than the first, and I hardly played, and I can't take this anymore. The only good thing that I knew, Adam, was that the next year they were having expansion. And I said, they're either going to trade me or they're going to leave me for expansion. I'm going to go somewhere else. I know I'm not going to. Any place would be better than Utah. I had to get out of Utah, so it wasn't a very fun 2 years. I had great teammates, I'll tell you that. I respect Jerry Sloan more than anything because he was a tremendous player and a good basketball guy. John Stockton was as good as it comes, right up there with Isaiah, a different type of player. Karl Malone was tremendous. I didn't always get along with him, but he was a great player. Mark Eaton was a good friend of mine. Thurl Bailey was a really good player. Mark Ivoroni was a really good friend of mine as a backup. A couple other guys here and there, but good guys. That was the wrong place for me and my wife at the time, and it was probably just as hard, maybe harder on her than it was on me, because she didn't understand it. And we were just married, and they weren't treating me very well, and we both had some physical problems, and that was also. I think during that second year, my mother and father were held up in their house at gunpoint.
Oh, wow.
So that was difficult to deal with while we were in the playoffs and not being there. Thankfully, everything turned out all right, but that was kind of scary. They were broken into by a kid down the street who was strung out on drugs and had a long problem, but he broke in the house and held them, put them in the trunk. And
oh, jeez.
It was really a bad situation. So I was 2,000 miles away, and couldn't do anything about it. Not that I could, but they ended up being fine or whatever. So it was very traumatic. So it was just a tough 2 years. So I was looking for a new beginning, anything. I had to get out of there and get on with my career and hopefully, salvage something and get back to being, loving the game and playing the way I did.
Wow. I'm not even sure where to go from there, but that's incredible. Thank you so much for opening up about that.
Yeah.
Just a real tough 2 years, to say the absolute least. And then to actually hear the initial trade from some other people at a golf club in a dressing room or something like that.
Yeah, it's not the way to handle it. Nobody talks about it. I mean, you hear stories from other people or whatever. That was mine. It wasn't, I never understood, never really got the truth as to why, but you got to talk to the person. I mean, that's the whole idea of it. That's why you don't break news until the parties are all informed and whatever. So that's the bottom line, is it wasn't handled well, and it came out of nowhere, and you got to discuss those things.
Yeah.
Back then, people like going, well, we have to do this. You go, no, you don't have to do this. If people don't know, then you don't tell anybody. So it wasn't good. So I'm sure there's other horror stories out there, but I have one of my own.
Yeah, that's right up there, unfortunately.
Yeah, it sucks.
Well, let's move on to brighter landscapes.
Yeah.
Following that 1988 season, you were traded to the newly minted Charlotte Hornets after they sent their number 4 pick in the expansion draft, who turned out to be Mike Brown.
Yeah.
A former guest on the show as well, episode 62. Great guy to chat to. He went to Utah in that deal. I've read a few articles about the deal that say that you were very happy with the trade, and obviously based on what we've just been talking about, that was an understatement.
Yes.
Do you mind just sort of talking through the deal that got you to Charlotte and your initial thoughts as you were heading to North Carolina?
Well, I was in contact with a couple of the teams. Miami and Charlotte came in 1 year, and then it was Minnesota and who was the other team?
Orlando?
Orlando, thank you. Just got a blank. 2 were coming in 1 year and 2 were going in the other year. So I knew I was either going to get traded to somebody because Utah wasn't going to have me back. So it was just a matter of whether I was going to go to an expansion team or I was going to go to some other team in the league. So I was pretty much, at least I was hoping, but I was pretty much reconciled that I was going to be, I wasn't have to go back to Utah. I mean, I probably would have preferred to go to an existing team, but again, I was in no position to tell them where I wanted to go or who or whatever. So I just knew I wanted to get at Utah. But again, until it actually happens, you don't assume anything. So and I talked to Billy Cunningham, was the head of things down in Miami at the time. I actually thought I might be going to Miami, but I knew that my former assistant coach under Chuck Daly, Dick Harder, was the head coach at Charlotte.
Right.
I had heard more from Miami than I had anything from Charlotte, but I think as it turned out, Dick Harder played it that way. He didn't want anybody to know that he was interested in bringing me to Charlotte. He didn't want to get that out. So then, as it turned out, the day of the expansion draft, before they actually had the draft, I got a call from both Utah and Charlotte. I don't remember which one was first, but at least they called me this time, right, Adam?
Yeah, true.
Frank Layden called and said, we traded you to Charlotte. I was thrilled. I was really thrilled. I mean, just to be no more in Utah, and
yeah,
he thanked me, whatever, and of course then Dick Harder called, and he was a good friend of mine, and my coach in Detroit is Chuck's assistant coach. I was heading to Charlotte. My wife and I were thrilled. She ended up getting pregnant right after that with our first child. So that was
fantastic.
I guess part of the reason why it was good to get out of Utah.
Yeah.
So I think stress-wise and things like that were affecting us. And I had been to Charlotte in college, so I hadn't been there in a few years. Heard a lot of good things about it. So they invited me down there. I was kind of like the first Hornet. Before they started picking all the expansions and having a regular draft and things like that. So
that's true. I hadn't actually thought about it that way. You actually were the original Charlotte Hornets because they hadn't had the expansion draft take place.
Yes. And the fact that they were getting a former All-Star, and I ended up becoming like the spokesperson and the guy. That's how the thing with the uniform and Alexander Julian and all that stuff. I was really looking forward to trying to resurrect my career now after those 2 years and going to Charlotte was tremendous. I mean, obviously hadn't thought about it yet, but you're an expansion team. You're putting together a bunch of, lack of a better term, misfits. I don't want to call these guys misfits, but again,
I know what you mean.
Some good players, coming from different teams. You're trying to organize a team, and then all of a sudden you're trying to compete in the NBA. It's not an easy thing to do, and particularly when you're 8 years in the league or whatever, and there's a couple other guys that are like Kurt Rambis and Robert Reed and whatever. We're older guys. You don't want to go through this now. I mean, you don't certainly want to go through losing at this time of your career when you'd rather be going, playing for a championship or having a contender or something like that. So again, anything was better than Utah, and so we went down there, my wife and I, and ended up falling in love with it. It was awesome. Charlotte was great. We had no idea what to expect. People that ran the organization, there were 3 owners, George Shin and Felix Sabatis, and this guy named Cy Bayhackle. I became very good friends with Felix. George was a different type of guy. That's a whole nother story, and how we kind of ran the franchise out of Charlotte. But nobody there other than a couple of the players knew what to do and how to run a team, because they're all new. So they didn't know the basic skills of, like, we had a new trainer, never been an NBA trainer. I mean, how to organize a trip, uniforms.
In July of 1988, you were involved in one of Charlotte's most memorable events, the unveiling of the fantastic team colours, the teal, purple and white. There's some absolutely classic footage of you, centre stage. I think it might actually be in a shopping centre from what I've read, but correct me if I'm wrong. You're alongside the famous fashion designer Alexander Julian. I'll put a link to this in the show notes because it's great footage. What do you recall of being the face of the franchise as far as debuting that new look for Charlotte?
I was proud to do that. I was kind of like, the star guy, I guess, because I'd been in the league 7 or 8 years.
2-time All-Star, so, I mean, you're definitely the face of the franchise.
Yeah, so, I mean, and I was, kind of like the first guy before they did the expansion draft and stuff like that. So I was, somewhat the face of the franchise for that. And they asked me to do the unveiling of the uniforms. So I actually went to New York.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was in his, I don't want to say it was in his studio. It could have been. It was, where he does all the stuff. We were in a building or whatever that he works in. And, we met Alexander Julian. He was given this task or whatever. He'd never designed an NBA uniform, so we didn't know how it was going to be. And as I told you before, everybody associated with the Hornets, other than the coaches and, maybe the general manager and the players, nobody knew what the heck they were doing. This was all new to them. So They were flying by the seat of their pants. So they said, we're going to go to New York, and it's close to you, obviously, because I lived in New Jersey, and, we're going to unveil the uniform. So you're going to be our model. Great. No problem. I'll do it. They had like a runway or whatever, stage, and Alexander spoke, and he's a North Carolina guy as well, so he had some connection somehow to the people with Charlotte, and after they decided on the colors and whatever, and they unveiled the uniform, and they called me up, and I was on stage, and they said, this is it, and then you pull the pants off, and said we're going to be teal and purple, and nobody was sure how that was going to work, but they were kind of cool, so we had a shooting shirt, we had the teal road uniforms and the white home uniforms. It wasn't until later on after I left that they got more purple involved, and it's great colors. And obviously they've gone back to those colors when they took back the Hornets name from the Bobcats, and it's a great color combination. They could do a whole lot with it. Now they have like 3 different uniforms. They have the teal, they have the white, they have the purple. So I just wish they would have gone to some of those other things a little bit sooner. But at the time, it was a big deal. You had a famous designer doing the uniforms. I was part of it as far as the model and the face of the franchise and doing some of this stuff. But, you can't do this alone. You got to have other guys, around you as a team. So, I was used to doing, things in order to help the team and sell the team. It's a lot of fun. I get made fun of a little bit here and there, but it is what it is when you're 20-something years old and trying to make it big. We had a great time. It was a big hit with the people in Charlotte, and obviously that led to a lot of people coming to the games in Charlotte. Must have done something right because it was sell out every single night we played.
Yeah, they were rocking at Charlotte Coliseum. I reckon it's just absolutely fantastic footage, and it's just a part of the league's history and a really exciting new franchise. So I've got nothing but positive thoughts about it, and I think a lot of people are thinking along the same lines as well.
We weren't in our element there. I mean, we go to New York, and you're with fashion people. So, you're an NBA player and you're NBA people, and you're in front of all these people that are looking to like these, fashion shows and stuff like that. And they don't know what an NBA team is or player is or whatever. So when you pull the pants off that come up with the snaps, you can, pull the front, they're like, ooh, whoa, what was that? It was just weird. It's a different lifestyle. So they didn't know what they were doing. They just, hey, this Alexander Julian, who they all know, is designing some uniforms, and he's going to have a fashion show. And we were a duck out of water. Let me tell you about that. We enjoyed it. We still tell stories about it. I guess I was the guinea pig. Leave it at that.
Well, you did very well. And speaking of those pants that ripped off, you did that with some vigor as well in the clip as well. It looks fantastic as you unveiled the shorts underneath. So, yeah, it's some classic stuff.
So this was like, going to kindergarten. These people didn't know what to do. Other than the guys that had been playing, had to show them what to do. The uniforms were ordered and they were too big. They didn't fit right. We had to finagle with that, and there's a lot of firsts going on, and so they were kind of like on the job training. But boy, we knew we were in a different place when we finally drove down there for training camp. My wife and we stopped and we got to Charlotte, and we had to get some gas. And I stopped at a gas station, and of course in New Jersey here you can't fill your own tanks. They had only 2 states in the United States where somebody does it for you.
Oh, okay.
You roll down your window and you tell them how much you want. I just remember the guy asking us, "How you doing? Have a nice day." He was so friendly and so kind. We looked at each other and going, "This isn't New Jersey." The guy'd be flipping you off and telling you you're an idiot. And we got the gas and we looked at each other, and I was like going, do I tip him? You don't tip a gas hit, but a guy he was telling me to come back and come visit again, have a nice day or whatever. I didn't know what to do. So we just knew we're going, man, if it's like this everywhere, this is going to be fun. So, and you know what, Adam, it was like that. The people down there are so friendly. It was so clean. They were so excited for pro basketball. And this was a college type of atmosphere. Obviously with Duke, North Carolina, NC State, Wake Forest. This was a college state, but they were so thrilled about having a pro team. And we had no idea how excited they were. We couldn't wait to get started. We didn't know if we were going to be any good. We had expectations, but be realistic. There's not many guys with experience to be able to compete with the big boys in the NBA, but we still had some pretty good players. There's no question about it. And that opening night in Charlotte was really special because they made it like a black tie and made a big deal out of it. This was opening night, and it was a big spectacle. A nice arena, 22,000 people. It was huge, sold out. And we're playing the Cleveland Cavaliers, who were really good with Brad Daugherty and Ron Harper and Mark Price and Larry Nance, and they're really good. We got our doors blown off. I had first points, first rebound, I think the first 3, the first assist. I had a lot of firsts. So that was the first steal. So they made a big deal out of that, and they can never change it. I'll still be there forever. If you look at the Hornets records now, it's still there. I had the first 20-point game, first 30-point game, first 40-point game. But we lost that first night in the arena, and the people were going crazy. And unfortunately lost by 40. So it didn't go the way we planned.
No.
And I'll never forget, towards the end of the game, we're already disappointed. I mean, this is a blowout. Like, oh my God, I hope this is not going to be like this every night. And it's about a minute to go in the game, and the crowd's going crazy. And we're like going, geez, what are they going crazy for? So the time's running down, and next thing you know, the buzzer sounds, and whatever the score was, I don't remember what, but it was 40. And all of a sudden, it's like a standing ovation. The crowd's going crazy. And my first thought was, oh my God, this is not going to be good. they're cheering for the Cleveland Cavaliers. So we're like going, oh my God, is it that bad that they're cheering for Cleveland? And guess what? They weren't cheering for Cleveland. They were cheering us.
Yeah.
Because they had a good time and they wanted us to know that they appreciate the effort and they were happy they had a team. Because the Cleveland Cavaliers had left and we were still on the court and they were cheering. That was crazy. I mean, that's not something you say.
No.
So we thought, man, you know what? If they're going to do this when we lose by 40, just imagine what this place would be like if we ever win.
What a tremendous reception from the fans to do that, even in the midst of a blowout.
That really inspired us. We figured from that point on, man, we got to give it everything we got, because if they're going to cheer just for like showing up, we lost by 40 and they're still happy, this could be really crazy. I swear, I don't think we ever got blown out like that again the rest of the season. We were in every game. And I remember how crazy that place was. Like a week later, we won at home. Then we went on the road and we won a road game. This place was a happening. That season was going along and you couldn't get a ticket. They had a waiting list of thousands. There were people that were dying. This was like going to the theater. This was like going to the play Hamilton in New York. This was like the place to be. Everybody wanted to go to a Hornet game. And if you had tickets or whatever, you could sell them for whatever you wanted to. They wanted to be there and be a part of it. And that place got so loud. It was such a home court advantage. They helped us pull out some wins that you wouldn't believe. It was a tough play. I mean, we beat Michael Jordan and the Bulls there right before...
just before Christmas.
Christmas?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
I had like 30 that game, and Rambis hit a buzzer shot, and that place went nuts. And we were on national TV. That put us on the map. That put Charlotte on the map. That's how good that was. And that's how those fans were. Hey, we won 20 games that year. They threw us a parade at the end of the year. We won the NBA championship. We had a parade downtown. And we were all in open cars and whatever. This is for a team that won 20 games. We went 20-62. And that's how excited they were.
That's fantastic. It's absolute devotion. And I know that Charlotte Coliseum, I think 8 out of the first 10 seasons of its existence, you led the league in attendance.
It was the loudest place in the league, no question, hands down.
Incredible. That game you referred to, the Bulls, when they travelled to Charlotte, and you had that 2-point win. I'm vaguely remembering there might have even been a halftime feature about yourself living in Charlotte and getting yourself set up in the town. Would that be right? Am I making that up?
I don't recall exactly. There's something to that.
Yeah, I can't remember. I think it was a TBS telecast, but I don't know if it was on that one or not. But I saw some clip where I'm sure it was showing you even at your house in Charlotte at one stage. I don't know if it was like for an inside stuff or... Probably something like that. We were celebrities in town. We couldn't go anywhere. Yeah, right. That's great. You go to eat and my wife and I, we set up a little organization where I bought like 20 tickets for underprivileged kids in town and in schools and whatever, called Kelly's Heroes. Oh, right. That's great. They'd write and, try to get their organization to use the ticket. So we were as popular as anybody could be in town. And I didn't like to stay home. Again, the NBA, then you had to get as much rest and you're in and out of town or whatever. But I mean, you go to the airport or you go to a restaurant or you go to the mall. I mean, you were mobbed. You were like the group that my daughter likes. The 4 kids that are real popular. Oh, geez, I'm terrible with band names. I mean, that's how we were. We were like rock stars. Not One Direction or one of those sort of bands. Yeah, that's it. There you go. One Direction. Thank you. I knew you'd come through for me. Yeah, One Direction. I like One Direction, actually. They're awesome. But that's hard. You walk in the mall. I mean, I couldn't go anywhere. If my wife and I went to the mall, I couldn't walk more than 10 feet. I mean, you hate to tell people hey, I just want to walk around and shop or whatever. People coming up to you. You go to a restaurant, they'd stop you. Go to a movie or something like that. You couldn't get anywhere, but it was great because I didn't mind doing it. I certainly didn't, hide or anything like that. I mean, people would see you in town, they'd be friendly, and they were all excited. I mean, you were a Hornet. So going down and beating, we won our first road game, I think, in
It may have been against the Clippers or San Antonio or something. I don't remember where it was.
San Antonio it is, Kelly. I'm looking at the box scores and schedules right now.
But just everything was a first, was just amazing. And then, we just became a difficult place to play, even though you were an expansion team. You knew if you didn't come into the Hive, into the Charlotte Coliseum and be ready to play, you were going home with a loss. So it was a long way from that first night against Cleveland. I'll tell you that, a long way.
I looked at Wikipedia, which obviously you can't believe everything you read online. It said that in a game between the Hornets and the Jazz back in '89, shortly after Frank Layden left as the Jazz coach, Karl Malone expressed his devotion to Layden by writing Frank on the heels of his sneakers.
Right.
Allegedly, in a mock gesture, it says you responded by writing Dick on the back of your shoes for then Hornets coach Dick Harder, coincidentally. It just says the move was seen as a jab at Layden and Malone, who ran him out of Utah. Now, I'm paraphrasing from Wikipedia there, which is never a good thing, but are you open to confirming this or what actually happened?
I have no problem whatsoever. I don't know why it was such a big deal. I didn't know that day, and I still don't to this time. And it's actually kind of funny because people see this and they don't understand it. And I have to recall going, you know what? I don't understand it either. I don't know where this went or why it went or whatever. Obviously, I played in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like it. It wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for my wife. I didn't like the trade. I didn't want to leave Detroit, but I ended up in Utah. I didn't get along with Frank Layden. I didn't feel he used me properly. I was kind of, as I mentioned before, a part of a trade where he was in a war of words or a conflict between him and Adrian Dantley, who I ended up getting traded for.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it was. It wasn't that I didn't get along with Karl Malone or whatever. He was obviously a great player, a Hall of Famer, one of the best to ever play the game.
Yep.
And this was afterwards, and I don't recall totally, but I think I saw something before we played them leading up to the game that he had started writing Frank on his sneakers
mm-hmm.
in reference to Frank Layden. So I'm just saying, well, why is he writing Frank? And I don't remember exactly why he was writing Frank on it. I don't think he was in trouble or anything as far as that. I think it was just he decided to show some support. I can't believe it had anything to do with me because he wouldn't be worrying about me. I was gone or whatever. So, but there was something that he started writing Frank on his shoe.
Right.
So I get this great idea, and I thought it was actually pretty funny.
I think it's hilarious, actually.
I said, well, he's writing Frank. He said, you know what I'm going to do? Because he's his coach. Like, for whatever reason, you're supporting your coach. For whatever reason. I have no problem with that. Why you would, I don't write stuff on my sneakers normally. No. So I thought, well, that's kind of funny. I said, I'm going to write something on my sneaker about our coach. Now, I think somewhere along the line, they thought I was writing Dick in a derogatory way towards him writing Frank. I don't know if that's true, like, a derogatory way, as we would say here in the States, calling somebody that name.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the truth. I was writing it just to mock him, for lack of a better expression, for him writing Frank on his shoes. I was just saying, okay, you write Frank on your shoes for your coach. I'll write Dick for Dick Harder on my shoe. That's all it was.
Yep.
So where they got that I was doing something, whatever the quote says, it had nothing to do with, because Frank didn't run me out of town. I wanted to leave. I wanted to get out. I wanted to get out a year earlier.
Yep.
I didn't even want to be there in the first place. But I didn't think he was obviously using me because my career for 2 years, went in the toilet. I just didn't think, the guy, I told you, great guys, great teammates, but I just didn't feel I was being used properly. They didn't really care after they got rid of Adrian Dantley. That's what kind of upset me. So the bottom line was I just wrote Dick in support of Dick Harder. That was it. It was just to give it right back to him writing Frank on his shoes. So I wrote Dick for Dick Harder. And that was it. That was the only reason why I wrote it. No other reason whatsoever. I just thought, well, Jesus, he's been writing for the last week or whatever he's been doing. I don't remember call. I just remember seeing it and thought, like, hey, either somebody told me, he writes Frank on his shoes or what, or we saw something and said, what does he have on his shoes? It says Frank. like, for Frank Layden on his shoes. I said, give me a marker. So I put Dick on my shoes in reference, and I think they took it the wrong way as something else, and it was in reference to Dick Harder. That was it, because that was his first. If his name was Bob, I would have wrote Bob on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's why I wrote Dick on his shoes, and that got a lot of publicity.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly what they were looking for or what they thought, but that's my theory on what they thought.
I'm absolutely intrigued by it because whoever I'm fortunate enough to speak to on the podcast, I always check out the Wikipedia page for that person, and usually I just steer clear of anything that's in there because I never know if it's actually accurate or not, and I pride myself on researching properly, but I saw this and thought, wow, I don't know how this even ends up as an edit in somebody's page, but who would go to the trouble of putting this into your page? So I thought I'd love to ask you about it.
Adam, I have no idea. I have seen it in the past.
Yep.
And it's funny that it happened, that it even, again, after the game, and, me coming back to Utah, whatever that meant or whatever. So it was just a needle, as they say, because he started writing Frank on his shoe in reference to their coach.
Mm-hmm.
I decided to write my coach's name on my sneaker. That was it. I thought, like, oh, well, he can do that. I can do that too. Now, as it turns out, I happened to play there, the year before and didn't get along with them, whatever. I showed up and played and whatever. I didn't like it or whatever, but it had nothing to do as far as trying to do something towards their coach. It was just specifically to match what he was saying for his coach, for me saying it about my coach. That was it. And it took off and took on a whole world of its own. That's the truth. That's the story. Whatever anybody else says, they don't know. That's just speculation they're making up. I'm just telling you what my thought process was. I'm not afraid to say it until somebody brings it up, which I think I've talked about it maybe twice in my life or whatever. Maybe one of them was after that game. They tried to make it into something that it wasn't, but just basically was me trying to be funny. You know what? It was pretty funny. So I think I succeeded in that regard, but I think they tried to make it into something that it wasn't.
Well, the way I took it was I read it as being very funny and clever as well, of course, at the same time. But yeah, I thank you for clarifying that because it's always a grey area when you chat about Wikipedia edits. Yeah,
well, I can either say, well, they don't know what they're talking about, or I don't know what you're talking about, but that's...
Yeah.
I'm telling you the truth of what it was, and like I said, I haven't talked about it much. It's not something that's mentioned or brought up or whatever, but I have seen about it, and you're only probably maybe the second person to ever mention it to me, and that's but I still chuckle about it because they want it to be something else, I think.
Yeah.
I just thought it was pretty clever on my part. That's all.
I agree 100%. It was very clever.
And I'm sure, you know what? God rest his soul. If I recall, I think Dick Harder liked it as well.
I'm sure he would have appreciated the support.
And then as it turned out, with my wife being pregnant, we were going to have the baby down there. So after the season, after the parade, the big news was following the pregnancy of my wife, Janice, and the first Hornet baby was going to be born. And my son, Travis, who was born May 3rd, 1989, he was on all the TV stations. We had to check into the hospital under an alias name. They had to sneak me in and out of the hospital through a back door. It was covered on all the news stations. We had press conferences, everything. It was crazy. He was the most famous baby down in Charlotte of all time.
It's tremendous to hear this. It's heartwarming sort of stuff. And what an incredible contrast from a couple of really dour years in Utah.
That's what made it special, Adam. That's why, because I had a good year. I really thought I should have made the All-Star team that year, and that would have been nice too, particularly with an expansion team.
You led the team in scoring with 23 points a game.
Yeah.
That first season, so you obviously were lighting it up again, and just to have that chance, I guess, to showcase your talents once more and be given that full opportunity, that made all the difference.
There's no question. That's exactly what I was thinking. I felt like I was back to myself. And, the fact that we were going to have our first child, we had a good bunch of guys. We played hard. We weren't winning a lot, but fans were excited. We were excited. so everything was certainly looking brighter, and we didn't know how good we could get. That's the hard thing about this, going through losing just sucks after a while, later on in your career or whatever. So certainly having my first son and going through the whole thing with the Hornet babies and things like that, it was a lot of fun. So made a lot of friends. Charlotte is still a very, very special place for me. So it's kind of like my second home. My second son was born down there as well, Jake, 2 years later. And it was funny because he was born in 91. My third year down there was when Dell Curry was one of my teammates.
Yep.
And my son Travis and Steph used to be in the locker room. They used to play basketball together.
Oh, how cool is that, hey?
Yeah, they used to get like a rolled up pair of socks or something. And I think Steph was a year older than Travis. So,
yeah.
But when, Travis could run, by that next year, year and a half later, those two would be, while we'd shower and whatever, those two would be running back and forth playing basketball. Obviously, we know what Steph has ended up doing. So great time in Charlotte.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, you rounded out your NBA career following the 1991 season, just as the team was, I guess, starting to build up and get better and better each season. And then Alan Bristow entered the fray as well as the coach. I only learned this when I was researching for your career. You headed overseas for a little while to play in France. How long were you actually over there for, or how did that opportunity arise?
Yeah, just a year. That was a mistake. It all kind of started at the end. It was, unfortunately, with the Charlotte thing, the end of firing Dick Harder, things kind of turned bad. I don't want to say similar to Utah, but they didn't handle it well, particularly after that first year. I was looking to get an extension in my contract, not a new contract, but just, I wanted another couple of years.
Right.
I thought I could play another 2 years possibly. I wasn't, asking for a lot, and I was gonna hold out. I had such a good year that first year, and I was certainly important to the team. It was just a matter of, again, getting something added to a couple of years to my contract, not tearing up my contract or whatever, because that's not something my agent and I believed in or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably should have done it, but Dick Harder kind of said he wouldn't support me. But I should have done it anyhow because, again, I can't emphasize enough. It wasn't looking for something new. I just wanted, another couple of years. And I didn't think that was asking a whole lot. So as it turned out, second year, Dick got fired. They didn't handle that very well. They actually, there had been rumors or whatever. And we had kind of a young team, and the young guys inmates started running the asylum, as I used to say.
Okay, yeah.
A little bit. Yeah, they were complaining about Dick maybe yelling a little too much. And that's when I knew the game changed.
Yeah, well, that's it. I guess throughout the 80s, most of the time, you need that sort of influence, I guess, from some of the coaches to sort of help direct the team and go as one and be uniform, I guess, but it sort of changed a bit.
Yeah, there's no question, because that's when, towards the end of the 80s, when guys started, going to the owner and telling him we don't like the coach, we don't like them. I mean, that's just not something we did back in the 80s, So I'm like, oh boy, this league's changing a little bit. So, there was some silliness going on and guys not taken seriously enough. And that wasn't my cup of tea, as they say. I was, I wanted to win and play, and you take it seriously. It's a job or whatever. And I just thought some of these guys weren't. Next thing you know, they didn't like the coach because he might be yelling or didn't do this or whatever. And then all of a sudden they fire them, and you're like going, oh my God, you're listening to these guys? We're in the league for 8-9 years, and you're listening to rookies and first year players. So I didn't like that. And they promoted Gene Littles, who was assistant, to head coach. And then my playing time went down a little bit. And then the following year, the last year, I wasn't nearly playing as much. And Alan Bristow came in, and he wasn't good for me either. So he started playing some other guys, and I'm like, oh boy, it's getting like Utah all over again. Because I wanted to stay in Charlotte. It was a great spot. I loved it. I certainly didn't have to start, but I just wanted to, I certainly could help them, and I just wanted another couple of years. And as it turned out, they really didn't say much after my third year. They really didn't say anything about re-signing me or whatever. They just kind of gave me the silent treatment or whatever. So that's when this thing with France came up. My agent got a deal over there. And I probably, looking back on it, I probably just should have just stuck it out and said no. because eventually come training camp or, beginning of the season, some teams end up finding out they don't have this or don't have that or don't like this guy or whatever. And next thing you know, you say, hey, there's a veteran guy out there that can shoot the ball and whatever, we'll take him. I know I could have helped somebody, but I went to France, Limoges, and I had no idea what to expect. So I took it, but I look back with regret. And that's another whole story that we don't even have to get involved in, because the one thing I regret, if I had ever kept a journal or wrote a book about my year in France, it would be a bestseller. Boy, there's some strange things that happen over there. So
wow, okay.
It didn't last. I started getting some nagging injuries and things like that, and that was almost it.
Once you'd retired from basketball, it wasn't too long until it looks like you got into a long career in broadcasting. So from what I've read, and you mentioned you did work with the Pistons. I think you also called games for the Nets, the Knicks, and even did some college basketball games as well. How was that transition to being starring on court to then actually going behind the microphone and starting to call games?
It's hard. It's not easy. It was fun. It was something I had thought about for a while, even when I was playing. I was always intrigued. It was kind of a communications major in college.
Okay.
Done a lot of interviews, and obviously you get practice after games and before games and things like that. And I was always intrigued by it. Wasn't sure exactly whether it was going to work out. But it's hard when you all of a sudden you're used to playing, you're competing, and you're only 32, 33, 34, whatever, and you can't play anymore, or it's not working. I mean, Father Time is undefeated, as they say.
Yeah.
Never loses, and nagging injuries and things like that. You remember I played, I got 2 bad knees now. I actually need an operation on my one knee. I've been walking around with a torn meniscus for a couple of months now.
Oh, right.
So, but I'm not going to do it in the middle of playing golf and things like that in the warm weather. But it's amazing how quickly, your career goes, 10, 11, 12 years, whatever, and then you're not playing. It's not something you do for the rest of your life, which is, kind of frustrating. But at the same time, that's how it works. So you got to try to find something else. And, for me, it was, let's try this broadcasting. But that wasn't easy either. I was trying to find some work, and then you're calling people and they're telling you, oh, well, get some experience. I look back now, and I've been doing this for over 20 years. And I see guys that have never called one game in their life, and then some of these national television stations hire them. And I'm like, guys tell me to go do this game or go do that game or go get experience. And I'm doing these little college games and just trying to get some experience. And then, then you do it for 15 years, and then they're hiring guys without even ever calling a game. It's very frustrating. It's a very difficult business. Backstabbing. It's not an easy business to be with, but I was fortunate timing wise that a couple of years out, Pistons were looking for a color analyst to do the games. And of course, obviously I played for them, and I knew the marketing and broadcasting director. He had thought about me as well. So when I called him, he said, come on out and do it. So I ended up doing 8 years of Piston basketball. So I had a name out there, and people liked me, and it was just tough to commute back and forth from New Jersey to Detroit. But I did that, and then so 8 years was pretty good, and I was enjoying it. It was fun. It kept me involved in the league, and I knew the league, and obviously I knew the game, and I got some great experience. And then an opportunity to come back home to do Nets games. I was offered a radio job by a guy named Lou Lamoriello, who was head of the Devils, but at that time, the Nets and Devils were kind of a one entity, and Lou Lamoriello was running both, which was kind of funny. But because he was friendly with Yogi Berra, who I was friendly with, he put a good word in for me, and I went for an interview, and they gave me the job. It was more money than I was making in Detroit. I'd rather do TV, but radio I didn't have a big problem with, so I did that. And it was an outside chance that the Nets television rights were going to get bought by a new entity called Yes, which was the Yankees, New York Yankees at the time.
Mm-hmm.
They said, well, you'd be up for an opportunity for that, but there's no promises. But this meantime, you can do the radio. So I did the radio for a year with the Nets. They went to the finals that year with the Lakers, and they actually went back to back because they played the Spurs as well. But the following year, Yes was formed, and they gave me the job doing the games on the Yes Network. So that was real big. So I did that for like 3 years. And unfortunately, this is when things can go crazy. The Nets were sold. The ownership sold them. And this one's kind of unheard of at the time, but the new owners wanted to get rid of the broadcasters, which really doesn't make a whole lot of sense because what do you care who broadcasts the games for?
That's very strange.
It should be the product on the floor.
Mm.
So my contract was up and they didn't re-sign me. And so I was out of work and I thought, this is crazy. I mean, like, we were good together. You're just hiring new guys to hire new guys. But, you know, it's typical of the owner knowing somebody and he's got a friend and not what you know, it's who you know, and you need somebody to do a favor. So at that time, Isaiah Thomas was running the Knicks. So he gave me a call later on in the summer towards the fall and heard what happened to me. And he thought that was BS. So he says, well, you got to do something. Why don't you come and scout for me? I didn't know anything about scouting. I mean, other than, you know, I know basketball. So I scouted for like 3 years with the Knicks.
Okay. I didn't actually know that. There you go.
Yeah. I did that with him. And then, of course, he had some problems and he got canned. I got a blank on his name from the Indiana Pacers that took over, that came to New York.
Donnie Walsh?
Donnie Walsh. Thank you. I was going to say he's a former player. Yeah. Donnie Walsh took over for the Knicks. And of course, here you go again. You've got a group of scouts and people. And of course, he owes some favors and wants to bring in his guys. And next thing you know, we're not going to use you anymore, but you really did a nice job. And I was surprised. And I'm like, should I take that as a compliment or an insult? Like, I'm surprised. What would you be surprised about? I've been around the league. I played for, 11 years or whatever. And, I broadcasted. I know the league for 20 years. And you're surprised at like what? That I know what I'm talking about? So, neither here nor there. He let me go. And I did like a year of Westwood One doing college basketball. And then I decided to hire another agent. We got into talking about how I left the Knicks. And I said, well, no problems. Do you have any problems going back there? And I said, for what? And he said, well, they're looking for Clyde Frazier doesn't want to do as many games, and maybe you could be his backup. Walt Frazier was, at that time, didn't want to do as many games, so they gave me a shot at doing his backup for some games. So I figured I'd take it. I called some games. They liked it. They kept calling me back. And then all of a sudden, they wanted to start a studio show. And they said, you ever had an experience in studio? I said, well, I can do it.
Yeah.
And not a big deal. Like, yeah. So, okay, why don't you come in and do it? So I went to the studio in Madison Square Garden, and we did a show. The guy they had there at the time was on the studio with Al Trotwig, who runs is the host of the show. And so we did the show. And the guy doing the show with us was like, 3, 2, 1, we're going to be on the air. He's sweating so much that it looks like it's a faucet running from his head. He's so nervous. And whatever. So I'm like going, holy mackerel. It's like there's a puddle. It was really kind of funny.
Yeah.
I think that was the last show he was on. So next thing you know, they're calling me going, hey, you really did a really good job in the studio. You can do the games and you can do the studio. I said, yeah, that's no problem. Next thing you know, I'm doing some games and I'm filling it for him, and I'm doing the studio show, and I'm really liking the studio show. So next thing you know, it turned into a regular thing where they do a pregame show and a postgame show. So I thought, oh, well, this is easy commute from my house here in New Jersey. I take the train or drive to a train station down the ways, and go right into Penn Station, which is right below the Garden.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy in and out. You do the pregame, you watch the game in a studio or whatever, and then come on for the postgame show. So I did that for like 3 or 4 years. It was a perfect job. This was right when LeBron was doing the decision. So we had a special summer, month-long, like 4 or 5 Thursday nights on the decision on what he was going to do outside Madison Square Garden. They didn't ask me, not that they have to, but they decided to bring a writer in to do the show with me. but they never asked me. Like they didn't say, just all of a sudden we're having a writer. But then they tell me, you got to try to help this guy. I'm helping the guy. He's never been on the show, and they thought it was a different perspective for a writer who used to, be an NHL guy, and he was an NBA guy. So he knows, all things about free agency and the trades, and, he's in the locker room and stuff. Great. Okay. Different angle or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
He adds to the show. So I help him, and freaking, not 2 years later. So we went through that year and then the next year, and my contract's up. So we've been doing the show. It's really successful. I won 3 Emmys.
Wow. Okay. Great.
And I get a call. I'm figuring, well, get a new contract, see if we can get a little more money. I get a call like in May or June after the season. And my agent says, so yeah, what's going on? I said, we getting anywhere? He goes, they're not bringing you back. I said, ha, ha, ha. I said, are we getting anywhere? He goes, I'm serious. I'm saying, you can't be serious. What do you mean? No, they decide they're going in a new direction. I said, what the hell does that mean? That was like 3 or 4 years ago. It sucks. It's like, there's no sense of it. Like I said, you win Emmys and the show's going great. And of course, somebody didn't hire you, wants to hire their own guy. And I've already went through this with the Nets. Since then, I've just done a little bit of college basketball with Westwood One for the last 4 years. I do about 5-6 games during the regular season, and then I do the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament. I do the NIT semifinals and finals because everything's kind of around here or whatever. So it's a tough business. I've about had it up to here, Adam, but you get to the age where all of a sudden you become irrelevant, and you start to think that nobody wants to hire you because you're getting older or whatever. I still feel I'm very good at it. Doesn't seem like I'm getting very many opportunities anymore. That's kind of frustrating. So, but it's the way it goes.
I hope those opportunities still present themselves, because judging by the fact that we've had this conversation for the best part of, I don't even know what it is now, 3 hours or something like that, something crazy. You've obviously got a way with words, and it's fascinating to hear all your history in the game. So I really hope that something does present itself again pretty soon for you at the highest level.
Well, unfortunately, I would tell you to put a good word for me in Australia, but that'd be a really tough commute.
Yeah, that's a killer of a flight, that one.
Yeah, I just don't think at my age I'm going to talk the wife into going to Australia anytime soon. Though it's beautiful. I told you, I had a great time in Sydney, man. It was awesome. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful place here in Australia. Now, have you ever actually entertained entering the coaching ranks?
It wouldn't be an interview if you didn't ask me that. If I had a nickel for every time I was asked that, I'd be a rich man just by myself.
I can imagine.
No, I just never thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly now the game's changed so much. I'm not sure kids want to be coached now.
It's a real shame, because you have such an incredible variety of experiences throughout your NBA career, playing 4 years in college.
Yeah, I get frustrated a little bit, I think, just seeing how, kids just, again, it goes back to the AAU mentality and things like that.
Right.
Let me just say this about coaching. I don't think I could be a college coach, because I definitely wouldn't want to recruit. That would be annoying, trying to tell kids how great they are at 13, and like kissing their ass.
Yep.
That's kind of different. I think I would do the pros more than anything. But the fact that it's now become like almost like a year-round thing is kind of difficult, between summer league and, over and over again. I'm not sure how much they listen to you. I don't want to make that sound like, nobody would, but there certainly would be people that would. But I just think the whole atmosphere of the game has changed so much. They're kind of coddled. And obviously you see that with the money. So how much they're going to listen to you? It's kind of tough when the guy's making $120 million and, you're making, just a lot less than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're flying around in chartered jets, and they got their posses and, Twitter. I put it this way. I've been asked that question a ton. My expectations are maybe too high. I have high expectations, and I expect guys to listen and to want it as much as I did. So I'm not sure I'd see that, but through broadcasting, I've traveled with teams, and I'm just amazed that when I got on planes after losses, how easily accepted a loss was. Because I can remember when we lost, we got on a bus and you go back to the hotel. Now they're getting on a bus and going right to the plane and leaving again. So they get on the plane, they're joking and laughing. It's like back to the AAU thing. They just think, oh, no, so what? We lost. There's a game tomorrow. It's another game. It doesn't really mean anything to them. Whereas we get on a bus and I go to my room and have room service. And I'd be thinking about, so I didn't miss this or I should have done that or whatever. You know what I mean? It stayed with you.
Yeah, gotcha.
You took every loss personally. You didn't want to laugh or smile or whatever, but now they get on. It's like it doesn't even exist. You know what I mean? So that's kind of hard. So that's where the coaching thing is because, I just have certain standards. You don't rarely see really good players coach. I'm not putting myself in that category, but a lot of times, those types of players, and it doesn't work all the time, but those types of players don't always coach because, again, they have those high expectations and they want everybody to be like them. And I just never felt like I could coach certain people. And maybe years ago, I thought the broadcasting would be a lot more fun. And then once you got to a certain age, I wasn't ready to backtrack and try to start something new at that age again. So a little different.
Just fascinating to hear your insights on all of the different things that you've done throughout your life to date. And there's just a couple of quick questions. That's silly to say after 3 hours of talking, but
that's all right.
There's a couple of quick questions I'd love to ask. Basketball Digest had a regular feature which was titled "The Game I'll Never Forget." Now, we may have already touched on it, but is there one game from your career that may stand out more than any other?
Probably the two that we already mentioned. I mean, being a part of that 186-184 triple overtime game in Denver is certainly just because you played in it, and it may be there for a long time. And, that was something special because it still stands. And I'm not sure it won't stand for another 30 some odd years or even longer. Who knows? It might be, I don't want to put it in the category of, Wilt's 100 points or Joe DiMaggio's 56 game hitting streak or, I'm sure there's a lot of other ones, but that may be there.
Mm-hmm.
That may be right there. I'm not sure. I mean, people, unless you're reminded of it, this next generation and generation to come, you got to keep reminding them of that game. I'm not sure how many people, know about that game. That's why every year, if it comes up or every 5 years with the anniversary, that people should talk about it. So I think it's that special. And of course, the game I had 56 was big just because of the circumstances or whatever. At the time, it was a record and, I was not feeling well and it's a big game. I don't want to make it a selfish thing because, it's certainly not that. Playing against Julius Erving the first game, that was big for me. Competing against Larry Bird, who I respected so much. We had the same agent. He was a guy that I always enjoyed playing against. Maybe I shouldn't say enjoyed, but, Larry's so big. People forget he's like 6'10", a small forward. Most of us were all 6'6", 6'7", or whatever. So, he was just so good. He just played the game the right way. Would have loved to play with him. Loved to play against him because he enjoyed the game and he played hard. I appreciate that as an opponent. I'm friendly with him. Again, we shared the same agent and liked competing against him because he took the game seriously. He could score, he could rebound, he could pass. He made his teammates better. He's a great player. A lot of fun to play against.
He did it all. 1986 was your last year with the Pistons, and that was, of course, the third straight MVP season for Larry and the NBA champion Boston Celtics. What was it sort of like to go up against that force that were the Boston Celtics, particularly in that incredible season?
The Celtics they're just good. I mean, you couldn't beat them at the Boston Garden. They certainly had a lot of help. If you weren't up by at least 10 points with 5 minutes to go in the Boston Garden, you weren't winning. That's how difficult that place was and how much help they got. Maybe the referee wouldn't let them lose there. But again, when you have Parrish, McHale, and Bird up front, that's as good as it gets. Hey!
I finally worked out my camera. There we go.
Oh boy, you got your Bulls hat on.
Shouldn't have this Bulls hat on, should I?
No, it's cool with me. I like John Paxson. I like Michael Jordan. I ran into Michael last year? because he owns the Hornets. So they send me down there a lot of times.
Oh, yeah.
Thankfully, they invite me back. There's a lot of things they did once they changed their name back to the Hornets again. So they brought back a lot of the original Hornets.
Yeah, I did see a clip actually of some of the OG Hornets coming out, like Muggsy, I think Rex Chapman, yourself.
Yeah, well, they had me. Dell does the television, and so they had Muggsy, me, and Dell. They had bobblehead nights and stuff like that, and then they had a couple of things when they changed the name to the Hornets back again, and so they invite me down a lot. So I like going down there because it's a lot of fun. It's still kind of a second home for me, so I enjoy that. So
speaking of bobbleheads, slightly unrelated, but let me just grab something here. Did you ever see these back in the day? These starting lineup figures? Because there's one of you.
Yes, I have one.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, I have one in my room over there, and I have the Hornets made a bobblehead, I told you, last year that they have of me, and I also have a bobblehead they made of me in Detroit as a broadcaster.
Oh, fantastic. That's great.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Because I was doing searches for Kelly Tripucka images and things like that. I'm not stalking you, I promise. And one of them came up was one of these starting lineup figures. I think it was a Charlotte uniform, number 7.
It is a Charlotte uniform, yes.
I ended up buying a whole stack of these sort of Jordan ones and a couple other ones from a friend of mine who kept them from all these years, and he wanted to sell them off, so I bought them off him, and I'm going to try and track down one of yours.
I've signed them. I know that. I get people that send me stuff still to this day. I don't know why I do it. My wife thinks I'm nuts, and I sometimes think I'm nuts because I get mail every day. And I hate to be a jerk, but some of these people are getting you to sign it, and then they sell it on eBay, which I don't like.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I can't say no. They find out through the internet that, hey, Kelly signs, they find my address, and they send a self-addressed stamped envelope. So I sign a couple of cards and I send it back. They send pictures. They send magazine covers. I've sent pieces of wood. They've sent basketballs. They've sent those things. I still do it, and I'm 57 years old, and I don't know why I still do it, but I do it.
You're a good man. I'm 41, and I'm buying starting lineup figures. So I'm not sure what that says about me, but if I ever track down one of the Kelly Tripucka ones, I'd love to send it your way, and if you could sign it, I'll keep it for lifetime. Trust me.
I'll sign it. As long as you pay for the shipping, I'm good.
I'll include the shipping costs. That's fine.
Oh, God.
One last thing I love to ask guests is about the significance of jersey numbers throughout your career. Now, we talked about Pistol Pete, and you'd mentioned Jerry West and a couple of others that were key influences on your career.
Well, look at this. Can you see that?
Number 7 necklace.
There you go.
Beautiful.
Yep.
I think you wore number 42 in high school from one of the photos I saw.
I wore 42 in high school because that was my oldest brother Tracy's number at Lafayette.
Oh, fantastic.
So he was kind of like, the first guy, the kind of idol because I saw him, play at a high level. And I thought 42 was a cool number because that's what he wore in college.
Oh, I love it. That's great. And then, so you talked about 44 and 7 and then 4 briefly at Utah as well, taking over Adrian Dantley's number. Yeah,
well, it ended up being Adrian Dantley's number. I couldn't get 7 because Pistol Pete was retired in Utah.
Yeah, of course.
I wore 44 for Jerry West and in college, and I just always liked double numbers. And then we couldn't wear single numbers in college at that time. I don't know if they allow it now or not. They used to tell us you couldn't wear single numbers in college because the referees, when they gave a signal for a foul, they didn't like, obviously in the NBA, they can go 5-2, they go 7. Mm-hmm. Whereas like if they go 25, they go 2-5 or whatever. But for some reason in college, they wouldn't allow you to have anything number higher than 5. So it could be 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24.
Yep.
You could be, I think, 1 through 5, but they wouldn't allow you to have more than that because of the referee's hand signals for whatever reason. So I probably would have wore 7 if I could have, but I couldn't. So I wore 44. I figured that was Jerry West was pretty cool. Just so happens that's what Adrian Dantley wore at Notre Dame.
Oh, yeah.
Been a couple of 44s after. And then I would have been 7, absolutely, but Pistol Pete in Utah, I have to respect that. So I figured I liked single numbers. I went back to half of 44, one of the 4s. And it just so happened to be Adrian Dantley's number. And of course, that got me in trouble as well because I got traded for Adrian Dantley, and they want to know why he would take his number. So it really didn't have anything to do with Adrian Dantley. It just happened to work at that. I'm 7. Everybody knows me as Mr. 7. So
yeah, well, that's what you rocked in Charlotte as well. I'm always fascinated to hear what a player's answer may be to that, because sometimes they're really into numbers and the whole why they chose certain numbers.
I'm definitely into numbers. Like I said, I'm 7 for everything. So in fact, I never forced my kids to wear 7. My son, who went to Duke and played lacrosse and won 2 national championships, he was 7. And he wears 7. He plays Major League Lacrosse as well. He has a job in Jersey City, New Jersey. He works for an investment firm. So, but he also wears 7. So whenever we see a 7, we always go, "What's up, 7?"
That's fantastic.
I'm the original 7, though.
I love that. That's so cool. Now, Kelly, I can't thank you enough for the amount of time that you've chatted today.
Not a problem, Adam. Not a problem.
Been so great. I can't wait for people to hear it, because you've got a great story. You've had a storied career. Thank you so much.
Well, I think you have more patience than I do. The fact that you want to do this just shows me that there's a lot of great fans out there. I think it's awesome that you're from Australia and that you're into the NBA, and you did your homework on me. Like I said, you probably knew more about me than I did, but once you start talking about things and you remember, as I'm getting older, some of it I remember, some of it I don't, but I enjoy talking. I think it's a great story yourself that you're this into the NBA and do the work and want to do this as a fan, and you certainly did a great job. I thought you were awesome.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Good job, and I enjoyed talking to you. All the best to you.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening. I welcome your interaction with the show. Suggest topics or guests you want to hear conversations with. You can leave a voicemail. Simply visit inallairness.com/voice. Click Start Recording. Leave a message and then press Stop. You can even listen back before submitting. Press Send and you're done. Worldwide, the show currently has 61 reviews, 58 on iTunes and 3 on Stitcher. Thanks for your continued support. If you add a review, I'd love to read it out on a future episode of the show. As I like to say, your ratings and reviews are one of the best ways you can support the podcast. If you enjoy the show, please tell your basketball-loving friends about it. Your word-of-mouth recommendations are worth their weight in gold. You can subscribe to my show in various ways. inallairness.com/iTunes. Add it to your Stitcher playlist. inallairness.com/Stitcher. You can also subscribe on Pocket Casts, Overcast, Player FM, TuneIn Radio, other podcatchers, and of course via the Podcasts app on your iOS device of choice. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show, and share my web address with your friends and colleagues, inallairness.com. Check out the podcast archive for plenty more episodes with high-profile guests. Follow me on Twitter @inallairness. Please add your like to the show's social hub, facebook.com/inallairness. Join me next time for another edition of the show.